in this video I'll be giving you a few tips on what you could do when you're playing a game of Firefight. So in this video I'm just going to be going over the list of things I've wrote down of what you could be looking for when playing Firefight. I've played a few games and I've noticed these things. There is an update up on the companion app. I think they're changing scenarios as this video goes up, or they might have when this video is up. But the fundamentals of the game really haven't changed. It's just how some of the armies work and how some of the scenarios work. So the first one, have at least 2 commanders. The thing is with Firefight, yes, you've got units that don't need to be within command radius of a commander to be able to use commands if you've got combat team training. But most units you will need to be within 12 inch of a command unit to be able to take a command. Having 2 means you've got commanders across the board, and you could take the same one twice and that's fine, but sometimes you might want half your force dedicated to do one thing and half your force dedicated to doing another thing, and depending on where you've placed units and where your opponent's placed units, it might be best off one commander going near some to show orders over here and one to just show orders over there. Yes, you're limited by how many commands of each command you can do per round, but having more than one commander means you've got more options and you've got more chance of your units doing better. One commander for small forces, say you've got like 3-4 units, fine, but if you've got more than 4 or 5, say it's I think you really are needing at least 2. Next one is check terrain size. Now you might think this is a bit weird, but let me explain. It's mainly for woods and that sort of thing. If your unit, the leader point more specifically, is more than 3 inches away from the edge, then the unit can't be targeted in it or shoot out of it. Now this is important to remember, because if you're using them cardboard cutout thing to put your trees and whatnot on, then you've got some idea of how far the edge of the terrain bit is. And a lot of people might forget that's a thing, but it just means, yeah, you're still getting cover, but if you are not far enough in to the wood, forest, whatever, then you're not going to be able to shoot much. But your opponent's not going to be able to shoot you, fine, but you ain't going to be able to either, so just keep that in mind. Next one I've got is check vehicle movement. Now in the command protocol book you will find this specifically on page 20, because certain vehicles have got different movement types, such as tracked, wheeled, walker and flyer and the like, and anti-grav. Different terrain will affect vehicles differently. Like for example, I'll just put here tracked on height 2 difficult terrain is blocking. So a tracked vehicle like a tank and such like can't drive through anything like a really tall barricade or anything like that. Obstacle, which is height 1, for a wheeled vehicle, it would be difficult. Let's see what else. Yes, so also works for units as well, but generally most units are pretty easy to know, and Well, it can be the same thing actually. You might think that that unit can take that easily when it might be the case of they can't. But yeah, check the unit. It should be, I suppose, movement. Next one is remember to hit the dirt if pinned. Now this is one that, in my games at least, some people have remembered, some people haven't when they really should. Especially when playing against Forge Fathers, which I do about half the time. They've got a lot of pinning weapons, and so hitting the dirt gives you a bit of cover and removes a pin marker. And so you can, you'll find this on page 21 of the Protocols rule book. Units may hit the dirt as free action when pinned if the owning player wishes. Now, this can be a downside if there is an enemy unit that can assault you. Because if you hit the dirt, then you are going to be toast when that enemy unit catches you in combat. And some units that are really fast for combat when you're being assaulted, not when the unit that's hit the dirt that's done damage. If the unit was pinned in assault, then the unit that's being assaulted would take a penalty, and the penalty is a lot worse when being pinned than hit the dirt. So if you're able to hit the dirt, if you're pinned, do so. A lot of the times it will help you more than hinder you. Next one I've got is unit coherency. Now, I'm just paraphrasing a little bit, but this is just basically how it works. Models in a unit need to be within 3 inches of the leader model. If a unit has more than 10 models, each needs to be within 6 inches of the leader model. So this means you can have a little bit of distance. You don't necessarily need to have each model an inch away. As long as you've got each model 3 inch, up to 3 inch away from that leader model, you've got a lot of leeway. And so for smaller elite units, you can scatter them about a bit, which is not bad, but it's generally a lot better for keeping out of line sight of enemies and whatnot. But for bigger units, it's probably better for assault purposes, because a leader model could be really far forward and the unit could wave around in one direction or another. Next one I've got is unit coherency. Now, a lot, in my experience, and I'm including myself in this, a lot of people don't seem to realise you can do this. Models in a unit need to be within 3 inches of the leader model. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's basically how it works. So what that means is you could have the rest of the models in a unit pulled back a little bit, so they could potentially not be within line range of an enemy unit, which can be very helpful, especially if it's a pinning weapon or a weapon that does a lot of shots. If a unit has more than 10 models, each model needs to be within 6 inches of the leader model. Now, if you are playing Plague, and I believe GCPS as well, I think one or two others, but mainly them two, you will have a lot of models in units. Especially if you're playing Plague zombies, you will have a hell of a lot. So, best thing to do with that, I mean, what you could do with that is swarm around one way onto an objective. So the leader will potentially be out of range of an enemy, but you will be within range to have models generally on an objective and to take it. I know zombies isn't the best example, but you get what I'm saying. You could have well, any unit of 10 really. It doesn't have to be plague, but plague is the best example I could think of. But GCPS do it as well with recruits, I believe, having a lot of models in it. But I mean enforcers, not enforcers. Veermin's a good one actually, because you can have a lot of models in those as well. Yes. Next one is using assault reactions. Mark the charged units as activated. You might think this is a bit of a stupid thing to say, and I'm not pointing out remember to use your charge reaction if you're being charged if you haven't activated. I mean, that's a good suggestion, but generally from what I gather and the games I've played, people do remember that one, which is, you know, it's one of them things that I didn't think people would remember, but I'm glad I'm wrong. But it's more of a case of, if you don't put the token down, then it's a case of you might forget, which is annoying. And some charge reactions mean you can move out of the way of the enemy unit, and sometimes charge reactions mean you might get to pin or shoot an enemy unit, and in the ensuing attacks and chaos and whatnot, you might forget to put the marker down to show the unit's been activated. It's one of those little things that you might want to just make sure you're aware of. Next one I've got applies to buildings and vehicles transports, and that is commanders in vehicles or transports can only give commands to other units inside the vehicle if they're in a vehicle, or building if they're in a building. This is one thing that I have seen in a lot of the games I've played that people do forget. People think, right, my commander's in a building, it's safe, I can just tell him to use command elsewhere. No. The only potential, well, didn't really an exception actually. It's one of them things that is very easy to forget, because you put your commander in there, you think it can give a unit from any point of the building. No, not at all. It's just from the thing that is in, if it's in a thing. In the transport, it's not as much of an issue, I don't think, because if you've got multiple units in the transport, it could get the unit to be more proficient in assaulting or shooting before the unit gets out, for example. Next one I've got is taking commanders on their own could be a good idea. Now, you might think that's a bit stupid, I grant you. However, some commanders have the small unit rule, which means they are -1 to shoot at as long as their actual unit model count doesn't go over the number in brackets. For example, most small unit commanders, you can take another like 2 models with, and you'd still have the small unit rule active. The small unit rule is enemies are -1 to hit your units with the small unit rule. This unit usually applies to commanders. There's 1 or 2 others it applies to, but mainly commander units. It's not necessarily just to save on points as well, because some bodyguards for commanders might be expensive. For example, some of the Forgefather bodyguards are Storm Range veterans, and they can be quite expensive, and so can Forgeguard for Forgeguard Hullskulls and Forge Lords, for example. But putting him on his own means it's literally a small model, and chances are it's not going to be that hard putting him in cover. Whereas if there's 3 models, yes, they're still small, but it's not going to be as easy to put them in cover. And also, because they're only a single model, you can hide it really easily, and your opponent's gonna forget about it really easily. The final one I've got is Non-mechanised units can be useful to take out mechanised units in Annihilation games. Now, for some people this is pretty obvious and people do it anyway, but for others not so much, and they'll just take mechanised units. That's fine, and potentially that can be the best way to go. However, taking say a unit of tank hunter infantry to take out a tank might make more sense. You can hide a unit in cover much more effectively. You get a lot more shots, and a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, the weapon that can hurt armour will have the special rule where, I think it's called target acquisition, where you can shoot that weapon at one target and everything else at a different target. Forge Father missiles and I believe Marauder missile launchers are an example of this, where they can fire at one target and every other weapon can fire at a different target. Storm Rage Veterans are a good one because magma cannons have got it, and so have missile launchers and Marauder Ripper Rainmakers. So they can fire each missile or magma cannon at a separate target, or each Ripper Rainmaker can fire each weapon at a separate target. So Ripper Rainmakers are expensive, by the way, but they are really good in Firefight. So good. And it's also a case of non-mechanised units in Firefight should not be overlooked. For example, for Forge Father lists, at the time of recording, a lot of people really like taking Hammerfist drop troops to be a fast deployable anti-army unit, and you can see why. For the first turn they come on, they're not going to be that effective. However, the second turn onwards, they are just going to rip through things. The reason I say the first turn they come on, they're not going to be that effective, is because chances are the vehicle isn't going to be within range because their guns are fairly short. But once they get within range, they are going to hurt things. Against flyers, well, they've got good AP, so but in the last, I think I want to say 1 or 2 games of Firefight I played, they take Hammerfist drop troops. Yeah, they just annihilate vehicles. Yeah, so if you're playing an Annihilation game, always think, have I got a decent non-mechanised unit that could take out vehicles, because chances are they'll be cheaper and a lot more manoeuvrable. Yes, for Annihilation games they might not be useful to taking objectives at all, but for actually taking out the things that can take objectives, they can be quite useful. So that's my little video of the little tips and tricks on what you could do for Firefight. Put the comments below if I've missed anything. I'm sure I possibly have. I'm sure more people who are better players than me at the game will be able to note some things down, but I think they're some of the main ones. Anyway, thank you for watching. Goodbye for now.